This podcast is for Ambrose Bierce's short story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. It's on page 251 of your e-fictions textbook, and you should only listen to this podcast after having read the whole story, as there are spoilers. The first section of the story, we read the very first paragraph in class, and the similar kind of description of the execution goes on to page 252. We should notice here how detailed and exact the description of the execution is, and this certainly relates to realism in general, and Bierce's attempt to be as specific and detailed and realistic as possible. If we can look at the last two sentences, though, in paragraph 4, this is the first time that we see Bierce play with time in the story. Time in this story is not linear, meaning that the second part of the story is a flashback, nor is it always consistent in the sense that a second is a second, a minute is a minute, and so on. The time is played around with greatly in the story, and the first evidence of it is in the last two sentences. When he looks down at the stream, he says to himself, this is Peyton thinking inside of his mind, how slowly it appeared to move. What a sluggish stream. And that's going to be important later on in the story, and we're going to look at other specific evidences of time slowing down. And then he notices in paragraph 5 that he hears this loud noise, and it appears that he is in this heightened sense of awareness at this point as he starts to realize it's his watch that he actually hears, again, a reference to time. And then it seems like every second gets longer and longer and longer. And so we are entering a new state of consciousness for our main character. Then at the top of 253, in the second paragraph there, he has his first glimpse of romantic delusions. And we've seen this scene so many times, all of us have, in action movies and TV shows. It seems like every criminal who ties a person's hands behind his back is completely inept at making a knot. And we can always find a way to get it loose right at the last moment. And this is what he thinks. Stories would have been no different back then. I mean, you're reading them rather than watching them on television, but there were so many kind of popular literature books that would be incredibly romantic and unrealistic, and that is what Bierce is making fun of here. We see that he says to himself, this is in the second paragraph on 253, if I could free my hands, he thought, I might throw off the noose and spring into the stream. By diving, I could evade the bullets and, swimming vigorously, reach the bank, take to the woods, and get away home. Again, a completely unrealistic situation, but something that we see really often in movies. And so he's thinking this to himself, and this seems to be invading his other thoughts, his thoughts he's trying to focus on, his wife and his family. Then, everybody needs to look at the last sentence in the first section. We have to infer here. It says, the sergeant stepped aside. If you miss what this means, you miss the story. The sergeant stepped aside means that when he steps aside, he steps off of the plank that Peyton is standing on, and that therefore he will fall between the different, between the railroad tracks on the bridge and fall to his death. That's how they're hanging him. That's the way they're doing it. So when the sergeant steps aside, we assume it means Peyton falls to his death. Then we have the flashback, though. And in this section, we don't have any omniscience. We're not able to get into Peyton's head. We notice in the beginning that he is rich, well-to-do planter, highly respected Alabama family, and it seems like Bierce makes a joke here that he's not in the military, and obviously it's because he had money. I mean, in the North, people were able to hire substitutes for themselves to go fight, and in the South, it wouldn't be so different that anybody of high status is not going to risk his life, even if he believed in what they were fighting for. Nevertheless, if we look at the second paragraph, he's sitting there having a very typical kind of Southern day with his wife, getting his drink for him and so on, and we see there's a reference in paragraph 9 to her own white hands, perhaps, again, a little bit of satire there, poking fun at her and at the South. And then we see this man comes and tells Peyton that there is a bridge nearby, and that Peyton can be a hero if he can figure out a way to take down this bridge. And that seems to reach out And it seems to be attractive to Peyton because don't we all want to be heroes? Don't we all want to do something amazing? And that he would have a huge impact on the world if he could just do this one thing. So he listens to this man. And if we turn the page to 254, it appears that Peyton is going to go try to sabotage this bridge by lighting the timber that's underneath on fire, burning down the bridge, and then making it very difficult for the northern troops to move deeper into the south and to win the war. But you have to look at the last sentence once again in this section. Page 254, last sentence of section 2. He was a Federal scout. The guy that is talking to Peyton is, in fact, a spy, is undercover, and is trying to set him up so that he is caught and executed. So, then we move on to part 3. Now we go into the romantic delusions of his mind. It can be assumed that this entire section is taking place in the mind of Peyton in the time between when the sergeant steps aside and he begins to fall and when his neck is broken immediately by the rope as he falls through the bridge. So a matter of a second. All of this goes on in his mind. And we see all of these... It's obviously our bell. We see all of these illusions that he has, delusions, extended. And he, at first, the rope breaks, of course, some improbable thing. I mean, a rope made out of hemp is not going to break because of somebody's, 150 pounds, 200 pounds of weight. It breaks. He ends up falling into the water, and then he's swimming away. People are firing at him. He's dodging the bullets, diving down into the water. They're all missing him. It's like any action movie we've ever seen. It's Deus Ex Machina at its best. And we see some evidences that he is in this fantasy world and that he's in his mind. For instance, he's able to see the color of the man's eyes shooting at him. This is in paragraph number 22 on page 255, that the man has gray eyes. And also, the way they're behaving, somebody in the military would notice, is not very accurate either. The people are behaving the way they do on TV, or in these cases, in literature. That first they all aim, fire, and then they fire at will, and just the behavior of them is only in Peyton's mind what he knows of the military and what he thinks that they would act like. Another piece of evidence on page 256 at the top, one of the bullets actually lodges into his collar and he has to pull it out, and it's uncomfortably warm when he does so. I mean, it's absurd. And nevertheless, we read and we're thinking, oh, he's escaped. Oh, he's going to make it, and we want him to because he's our hero. He acts like he's an expert later on in paragraph 30 on 256. He says to himself, they will not do that again. The next time they will use a charge of grape, meaning that they won't just fire a single cannonball. They'll put a bunch of shot in the cannon and pretty much do a big spray of bullets at him. And, he's suddenly an expert on military decisions. It's all pretty ridiculous, but we're so used to seeing this that we don't really question it as a reader. Page 257, more evidence at the top that he is, this is all in his mind. He had not known that he lived in so wild a region. His surroundings are different because he's in a dream, because he's picturing all of this at the moment of his death. And also in paragraph 35, the last sentence there after the dash, he could no longer feel the roadway beneath his feet, because there is nothing beneath his feet, because he's hanging from a rope. Then he even says that he has fallen asleep while walking, as if that's possible. And so it gets more and more ridiculous here, and a close reader might start to question some of these things, but in general, most of us just kind of believe it. And then at the end of the story is the big twist, of course, that he in fact was all along dead. So we see a big point being made here by Bierce about romanticism, that the reality of these deaths and these situations is really bland. And although he thought he was going to be a hero, he in fact ended up doing nothing for his cause, doing nothing for the South, and is probably somebody who won't even be remembered for doing anything special. Thanks for listening. That's all.